is the one I like the best. And it's very much like the traditional shields. They're kind of made like that. And what happens in the traditional shield is they would pull the foreskin through this little slit. And then this part protects the penis. And that way then you make your cut, most of it, you make your cut against this metal shield, which is protecting the penis itself. The Mogan clamp is very much like that. It operates like this. And what happens is you pull the penis, I'm sorry, this is kind of open here. You pull the foreskin into this area. And then you clamp it down so that you've got foreskin on this side, penis on that side. And when they clamp it down, it pretty much clamps the blood vessels and the nerves. So there's less pain and less bleeding. And then all they do is, like that, with the, what do you call it, with the scalpel, and it comes right, the foreskin comes right off. So I like that because it's faster. There are 3 parts to the actual circumcision. You first have to make a cut in the foreskin. That's part 1. Then, after that is done, you have to loosen the membrane between the foreskin and the penis. In ancient times, it was done with the moil's fingernail. Today, it's done with an instrument that just kind of, goes in and separates it, a septic instrument. And the cut, by the way, the first cut, is usually what the kid hates the most. Now, until recent times, and kind of hold your stomachs, until recent times, part of the tradition, the third part, they don't do it anymore, was the sucking of blood, because the whole point of the circumcision is that there be a drop of blood from it. That's why the hatafat dam, or the taking of a drop of blood, could be done even if a kid's been circumcised. That's the symbol. And the moil used to suck it out. But of course, they finally figured out that kids were getting infections because of the germs in the moil's mouth, and the moils were getting infected because sometimes the kid was not sterile. So that has finally been taken completely out of the picture. There are 2 other clamps. They involve a little bit more, so it takes a little more time. But they're just as effective, they're just as fast. So any parents-to-be who are worried about this, please stop worrying. It doesn't take any time at all. It's over in seconds, and you and your kid will be just fine. But then when they say they're Jewish, they'll never have to wonder, did I get my start in the right way? Yes?
What happens to the foreskin?
There's jokes about that too.
Yeah. There are some legends about it that somehow bury it. There's some legends about that, but I don't remember. Usually it's thrown away. Today they often use it for stem cells, as a source of stem cells for stem cell research and growth. Okay. Any other questions about that? Okay. What happens at a, what happens, so if you ever need it, both Rabbi Simon and I have a list of obstetricians who will do this. They're great at it, and they're always happy to do it. When a bris is done, what happens everybody's in the room, and then there's a chair there called the Kisei Shel Eliyahu, the chair of Elijah. And there are different explanations as to why eventually the child with a sandek or a kvater or kvaterin, why the child sits in the kvater, kvaterin's or sandek's lap and sits there for a moment. The explanation that I like is that Elijah the prophet is the herald of the coming of the Messiah, or a messianic time of peace. And it's always our hope that every child born into the world will be the messenger and the one who brings that peace, who brings harmony between people. There are three different people who traditionally brings the baby into the room. And all three are known as godparents. One is Sandek, one is Kvater, male, and Kvaterin is female. Those come from Yiddish. The Kvaterin takes the baby from the mother and brings it to the Kvater or to the Sandek. The Sandek brings the baby and sits in the chair of Eliyahu Hanavi, the prophet, and we sing Eliyahu Hanavi, and we sing Baruch haba, welcome are you. And then in traditional times, and still today traditionally, there's a pillow on the lap of the Sandek or the Kvater, which today often is one or both of the grandfathers they sometimes choose up. And it was traditional for that Sandek to spread the baby's legs apart so that the moil could operate and do what he had to do on the child's penis. I see it done some today. More often than not today, they use what's called a circumstraint. Imagine a plastic molded, kind of big, I don't know what you would call it. But it looks like this. It's all plastic. And it's got this indentation in it. And it's got straps here, 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 and here. And they lay the baby in it. Sometimes the moil usually the moil doesn't bother with these straps so the kid can move his hands, but his legs are strapped down, and that way, the kid isn't going to move at the wrong time and cause something to happen. So I'd rather have the pillow, the circumstraint, and then the little boy in the circumstraint so that there's a little, and usually when I do it, we don't use the chair, the pillow, we just put the circumstraint on a table. And that way it's even safer. We usually ask for some good light, and we do the circumcision. After the child is placed into the circumstraint, the moil will get the kid all ready, and then moil will make the initial cut, the moving of the membrane, and then when the moil has the clamp in place and gets ready to do the cutting, the rabbi or the moil will say, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu mitzvotav v'tzivanim al hamilah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and commanded us to engage in this act of circumcision. Once it is over, then the father in Hebrew says a prayer in which he thanks God for having allowed him to pass the tradition on to his child. Then you have a cup of sweet wine, any color, and you mark the moment of sweetness with the Borei Pri Hagafen, the blessing over the wine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei Pri Hagafen. Amen. Then you say a Misha Berach prayer. And in that prayer, you do two things. You ask and thank God for having brought the mother safely through delivery. And you use her Hebrew name there. And therefore, delivery is not taken for granted. And remember, today, the chances of a child surviving and a mother surviving delivery is relatively good in most developed countries. You know, maybe even 50 years ago, that wasn't the case. A lot of moms died in childbirth. So then you say, as part of that same blessing, Misha Berach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel Leah, will the God of Sophie take care of the mother, her Hebrew name, and her son, and then it gives the son's Hebrew name, which is where the naming of the Jewish boy occurs. And once all that is done, then the baby is all, you know, they put the diaper all back together, and a final Yevarechacha, a blessing, is said, and then everyone sings Siman Tov and Mazel Tov and Mazel Tov and Siman Tov. It is a good sign and a sign of good luck. Yehelanu U'Chol Yisrael, for us and for all of Israel to celebrate a moment such as this. And then you have a huge celebration of all kinds of eating and festivities. And everybody's happy except the kid. So that essentially is what happens. Now, here's kind of what I do. I pass the young man, as I do for a girl's naming, through the generations. I generally have the child's aunt or uncles, aunts or uncles, bring the child in while we sing Avenu Shalom Aleinu. In other words, may there be peace in the life of this child. And then I give the child to one of the grandparents, and we say one of the prayers. Then to another grandparent, we say a prayer. Then I have the dad or the mom or both take their talit, you know, the prayer shawl, and put it, they hold the baby and use the talit as a blanket. And I point out that this is the first time that this child is surrounded and enveloped by the talit of Judaism. And that it's my hope 13 years from now, at the child's bar or bat mitzvah, that he or she will wear that talit at the beginning of the bar or bat mitzvah service. And when the child gets ready to read from the Torah, the child will return that talit to the parent or parents, and the parents will give the child his or her own talit. And then one day that child, as he grows up and has children, will do the same thing. I always ask my parents to talk about their hopes and dreams for the child, and to talk a little bit about the best qualities of the people who the child maybe is being named after. So it's a very moving part with the parents' hopes and dreams, and about the qualities of the people, the deceased, after whom they are named. And then after that, I usually hand the baby, do the naming, and then hand the baby to the other set of grandparents and do the Yevarechacha and bless the child. And if it's a bris and we have time, it's not a fast one, then we have a cutting in the middle of it. So, as a Reformed Jew, we use some license. I don't know. Do you see Rabbi Simon anywhere?
Yeah.
Okay. Naming. How do you pick the Hebrew name? For those of you who are, hold up a second. Rabbi Simon? Rabbi Simon? Okay. There are a million ways to pick a Hebrew name for a child. The ones that I like best are naming the child after a relative who's died. Now, if you are a Sephardic Jew from a country around the Mediterranean Sea, the tradition is the exact opposite. Have I told you that before? They will only name the child after a living relative. And so the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim, Ashkenazim are Jews who live in Eastern and Western Europe, are at loggerheads in this thing. And I have married a couple where he was Sephardic, she was Ashkenazim. And I can still remember the fight that went on in this kitchen between the grandparents. And finally resolved it by naming the kid's first name after a living relative, middle name after a deceased relative, and both families were equally unhappy. Sometimes that's the best you can do. you know?